everyone. It's Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, but you knew that already. You are here at Litvak Leadership Live. We're not only streaming, but we are on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and our soon-to-be website, Litvak Leadership, premiering in probably about a month, closer to June 1st in that area. Today we've got, I was just telling him, a highly educated individual, Dr. Darin Gerdes. He is a professor of management in the College of Business and a director of instructional technology, all around leadership. So do you prefer Dr. Gerdes or Darin?
You can call me Darin. That's fine.
All right. So Darin, welcome to Litvak Leadership Live. So happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So let me ask you right away. I've never heard of someone getting their PhD in leadership. Talk about that.
Yeah. So if you roll back the clock 100 years, let's start there. Henry Ford's in the factory and that kind of thing. Drucker wasn't yet on the scene, and we would have said the same thing about management. What do you mean you're getting a degree in management? That doesn't even make sense. Right? Because it would have been some kind of industrial science or something like that. Management became all the rage up through the 1980s. By the 1980s into the early 90s, that's when leadership started becoming preeminent. Or popping up in multiple universities, because we started to recognize, hey, you know what? When we treat, like, management's all about efficiency, right? And when we treat people efficiently, they don't like that, because it turns out they have feelings. And, you tell a machine to do something, it does it. People talk back. And so leadership it's seen as a subsection of management, in the same way that economics, we talk about getting your degree in economics, but it used to be political economy. What's economics? So it's just a subdivision. It's a smaller section, and it deals with the human side. If you're dealing with people, look at leadership. If you're dealing with stuff and being efficient with your machines, look at management. So that's kind of the background of it. So
are you saying that we talk about, senior. Well, it's interesting, because you hear the term senior leadership and the term middle management and entry level management, right? Yeah. You don't hear the term entry level leadership. So why is it then that we talk about senior leadership or executive leadership in an organization, but when we look at the middle and entry level, it's management?
Nobody's ever raised that question before to me, but it's a really interesting thought. And I would say that a lot of senior leaders are actually in a position where they're supposed to be leading, and very few of them actually do. They take that managerial thing that worked for them, which got them there. That's where they made their chops, and then they get promoted to something. But when you're promoted to something, you're trying to get their work done through other people, and sometimes they learn somehow accidentally, maybe, that they need to be leading, and then sometimes they're still doing the same thing and causing a train wreck. But they got the bottom line, or they made the numbers, or whatever it is, and they get promoted along the way. I don't think at entry level you should be thinking of entry level leadership. I mean, yes, frontline leadership, something along those lines, but generally at the front line, you're just doing your job. Then you move up,
right?
But at the top, there's too much managing and not enough leadership. And again, leadership is that human side, dealing with people, and it's essentially caring about people. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And most people think it's too soft, or it's not, enough. But if you don't get this right, everything else goes wrong.
So you and I are of similar political persuasions, similar faith persuasions. And I would say that looking at, creeping your social media, and this is something with me too, I have had to learn to be more empathetic, and I don't necessarily come across that way. So how does one lead with empathy, but at the same time get stuff done?
How does one lead with empathy but get stuff done? I think leading with empathy actually helps you get things done. So let me explain it like this. So the questions, like assuming that they're in opposition to one another, I'd say I'd say it doesn't work like that. So we think, and I knew a vice president at an organization who like installed cameras in order to like spy on people while they're working to make sure their butts are in their seats and they're getting, they're working. It's because we have this stupid idea that if your butt's in your chair, you're just being productive. That must be what it is. You get productive. Okay, so let me back up. We know that, doing more work tends to lead to more productivity, which leads to better profitability. Okay, right. But you get it done not by measuring how much time somebody's butt's in their chair. You get it done by getting their heart. And I say this in class all the time. If you have my back, you get my heart. And I'll go through a wall for somebody who I know has my back. Now, on the other hand, if I'm just raw material to be used and spit out, that's different. I don't know if you're going to throw me under the bus, if it'll get you a promotion, right? So you don't get my heart. So I'm going to do whatever that minimum amount is that you need to get done so that I can get my job done and our, social contract is there. But that's a whole different place than if you have my back and you get my heart, right? If you've proven to me that you're going to look out for me, you get my heart, and then I'm going to make sure that you look good and you get everything that you need done. That's the high road to that profitability. They're not in opposition, right? If you care about me, if you know things about my family, if you care about my interests, if I'm a whole person, right? Sheen and Sheen, I use this book in class, Humble Leadership. Talk about like there's these different levels. There's like this negative level where it's like slavery domination. That's bad. But then there's like level 1, and that's like, let's be professional and let's just, you do your job, I'll do mine, and we're just professionally courteous. And he says like that's what we're taught to do, but that's not where you should be. Level 2 is that we know each other so well that we can trust each other and we get things done because we have gotten to know each other, not just as you're an accountant and I'm a researcher or whatever, not just those positions, but we know each other. We care about each other. We sat down and had lunch together and get to know, right? And then there's level 3, the level above that. Now that's reserved for like close family, friends, that kind of thing. We're not trying to make everybody best buds. You don't have to be. That's for your own, your own sphere of life. But if we can get beyond level 1 into level 2 relationships where we can trust, we can operate at such a higher operating capacity that is just far beyond what we but what we normally do is let's just be professional. Let's just stay at an arm's distance. And then we treat each other like objects because you're an accountant. So no, you're a whole person. You actually are a whole person with hopes and dreams and aspirations. You're not just an accountant. So why do we treat people as objects? Because that system kind of causes us to act that way. That's not the way we should be operating. So let's go back to what you were just asking. Aren't these in conflict? No, they're not in conflict at all. If you and I know each other and learn to trust each other, we're going to be operating so much better. And that's all leadership. Right? That's not management of let's be more efficient and try to figure out how to, optimize. No, that's heart. And you're going to get far more if you get somebody's heart than if you're just trying to optimize.
So while we've been in, hasn't been shut down anymore, I guess, but it has been distanced and people not working amongst each other. And now, with the masks going away and businesses in some parts of the country, like where I live, Humana says come Labor Day, they're going to have their offices open in a more meaningful way. They've yet to really define what that is. But it's interesting. I was talking to someone else the other day that in the state of Kentucky, the mask mandate disappears on July 11th. And this individual's opinion was that everyone's going to be returning to their offices on June 14th, since, it's 3 days later. How do leaders, or how should have leaders during this time that we find ourselves in, how should they have been engaging with their teams to encourage, to cast the vision, to communicate?
Yeah. So, you're asking in a snapshot, but you have to go back before the snapshot. If you were doing things right and you actually, let's go back and say that before COVID hit, February of 2020, you had been actually caring about your people, learning about them, then you can individually deal with them very easily because you know where they are, you know what their needs are, who needs special consideration, who should be staying home, who needs extra attention if they are home, all those kinds of things. Once you get into it, how you deal with it is kind of like online education. So if you know anything about online education, I've been teaching both residentially and online for 20 years, right?
All right.
Online experience, if you've ever been in an online course, the student feels it almost tutorially. They don't feel like everybody else is in class with them. They just feel like, I'm getting that information from the professor. Oh, now I'm getting it from somebody else in the class or what. But it feels like they're alone. It feels like they're isolated. It feels like, so you have to think about it like that and take extra steps to reach out and be part of what's going on in their world. So you as the manager have to do more with each individual. And then, you also need to meet in meetings. Like we've had Zoom meetings and things along those lines, but you have to be judicious about those meetings. The greatest thing about COVID has been that stupid meetings have disappeared. The number of stupid meetings that we had because somebody was trying to prove that like, see, I'm justifying my existence and doing this thing has largely gone away. And we went down to bare bones. So you still do need to have some meetings, but you need to have those as infrequently and, as ruthlessly efficiently as possible, maybe with time to talk afterwards for those who want to stick around. But Zoom works, but it's not a direct replacement. And so we've learned those kind of things, but the time that you spend as a leader dealing with people, you have to know where they are. The trickiest place is somebody who comes in during the shutdown and trying to get to know somebody online. It's not the same thing as when you can sit down and break bread with them or just, hang around in their office and talk and that kind of thing. So it becomes very tricky if you do not already know what's going on in their world. But if you do know what's going on in the world, if you already have that established, it can be easy.
So tell us about the Leadersmith Podcast.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing it? What's it all about? Where do we find it?
Yeah. So let's see. Well, let's roll back the clock. 2020. It was the end of the semester, the Monday after graduation. Again, I'm a professor, so I have my summers. And Monday after graduation, I started the podcast. I had been thinking about it for a couple of weeks. And I was thinking so I talked to one of my former students who had a podcast and he had like 50,000 people had listened to it. I'm like, wait, I could do that. And I started thinking, I talk for a living, not a hardship for me. So I started out. And in my first podcast, I said, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Nobody listens to me. There's not going to be any, financial ramifications. Nobody can tap me on the shoulder and say, I'm sorry, but no, not enough people are listening to you. So you have to go now. No, as long as I decide I want to do it, I can do it. Now, the podcast itself is just talking about leadership, and it can come from many different angles, but it's always talking about leadership. I always end with a quotation for contemplation. I try to keep them really short, something like not less than about 10 minutes, not longer than about a half hour. And I've gone slightly under and slightly over on occasion, but I'm thinking about like that person that's in the car on the way to Walmart or on the way to work. Just that's what they want. They want to listen to something that's going to be good food for thought. And, I'm just looking at what I find interesting. And I'm never going to be a successful like a Kardashian because one, I think that's inane. And I don't know how that many inane people want to listen to that. But if you want to have food for thought, I see it as just an extension of my classroom. And so I'm just importing the kinds of things that we would have talked about in class to the broader world. And that's the nature of the podcast.
So you just started we'll say beginning of summer.
Yeah, that's correct. It was a year ago, 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So is it just you or have you had guests?
Yeah. So I do both. So I talk for a living, so I'm not worried about monologues. And it's not so like some people want it, like my 5-year, no, not 5-year-old, my 8-year-old wants to be a famous YouTuber. Like Have you did you want to be on YouTube when you were like, so I put the podcast both on YouTube and it's also in audio form. But did you want to be in YouTube when you were little? They didn't have YouTube when you were little. They didn't. No, they didn't have YouTube when I was little. Well, they didn't even have the internet when I was little. I mean, I got on the internet when I was in grad school, not even in college. I mean, that's just mind blowing to her. But yeah, so I started doing it just like here. It's almost like therapeutic because I find something that I want to talk about and can express and make some points about. And it's like writing. I learn more in the process of thinking through it and talking about it. So some are like that. And then some I have guests on. I think about somewhere between a quarter to a third have been guests.
All right.
And then I made a conscious decision that I want to move far more toward guests because I learn a lot when I talk to guests, as I'm sure you do. And
tons.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I'm like, why did I not do it before? And it's far easier for me to control it just by myself because then I don't have to worry about what time and working out, coordinating and that kind of thing. But I've learned so much from guests. I had a guest on last week who was talking about, and in fact, Wednesday and part 2 will be tomorrow, who was talking about Ulysses Grant. And there is so much that I learned about his life, how he was actually quite a servant leader. And I was just fascinated by it. And I was for days after recording it, I was just like, I kept thinking about it. And so you learn so much from different perspectives. And I just, again, I do both sides, but it's always all about leadership. And, I talk about how, look, I hope this helps you. I end almost every episode talking about how I hope this helps you become the kind of leader that you would want to follow. It's like the golden rule applied to leadership. Right. That's my goal. I want them to think about who would I want to follow and how can I become that? And that's really important. I hope this helps you become the kind of leader that you would want to follow. And
so what are the top 3 steps to becoming the kind of leader you want to follow? What are the top 3 things people can do?
I mean, I don't know that I can enumerate like that, but there are certain things that are definitely there if you want to become the kind of leader you want to follow. One, you want to know what that is. And you do know, right? Like it's not, you don't want to follow a dictator. You want somebody to be successful, but you want them to care about you, right? Remember that if you have my back, you get my heart. It's like that, right? But the big thing, like I was talking to a guy that was a psychologist, and when he found out what I do, like we were just starting talking, and when I found out he was a psychologist, I thought, oh, maybe I can start asking him some questions, find out what he does. And he was talking about what I do. So he said, well, that's interesting. So what are the traits that, make a good leader? Kind of like what your question was.
Yeah.
So, no, that's not the way to think about it. Think about it like this. Care. If you simply care about the people that you're leading, you're going to naturally do the right things that will cause them to react to you the right way. Because if you really do care about people, you treat them differently than if you're trying to use them for whatever your purposes are. Right. And so that's going to get you the longest way. So let me reduce your 3 to 1.
All right.
Just one thing you can do, just care about your followers. You do that, everything else works. Like they'll forgive you for even doing stupid stuff or not having it all together or not knowing everything and if you don't know things, they'll help you if you care. Right. And that's the opposite than if you know it all and you don't care. They're going to react pretty negatively to you and maybe even sabotage you because you're a jerk. So just care about them and everything starts to go the right direction.
So what is, we all know what the inappropriate ways of showing people you care are, because we see headlines about politicians and, TV personalities doing it wrong all the time.
Don't mentor like Cuomo.
Yeah. Exactly. Which is exactly what I was thinking of, actually. What would you say is the number one, because, there's different personality types out there. Mm-hmm. So what is the number one middle of the road way to show your team, those you work with, that you care?
Yeah, I would say show them that you'll defend them. And in fact, you don't set this up like in a fake way, but go down fighting for them it will gain you more credibility. Like you lose the battle trying to defend their cause will gain you more credibility than anything else. I don't mean scuttle it. I mean legitimately trying to defend them, trying to help them get whatever it is that they need to get done. Because look, your job as a leader is not okay. So as an individual contributor, you do your thing. As a leader, you're getting work done through people. That's the nature of it. You're getting things, you're getting obstacles out of their way. You're equipping them with what they need. That's your whole shtick. That's your job. And then you're supporting them as they're getting their work done. But so if you can get them the thing, then you win. If you go down swinging, losing, and don't get them the thing, you still won because now you have their hearts.
Because they saw you fighting.
Yeah, they saw you sincerely doing what in your best interest, trying to get them what they need. And so that's the number one thing. So sincerely do that, pursue that, get that thing. And if you win, you win. If you lose, you win.
So on you've written many a course and many a curriculum. One thing that jumped out at me was, the course you teach called The Fundamentals of Leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about that.
Yeah,
what is fundamental?
That course, I start out with this this PowerPoint slide where I talk about this is the only class where I tell you if this does not fundamentally change the way that you think about leadership, I can't give you your money back because the money's not going to me, it's the university, right? But right. I will allow you to assign me any book that you think is better about leadership. I will take notes. I will provide you an oral report on it. That's part of me showing, look, I believe that this is legit. That's part of me going, hey, maybe I'll find out about a good book. Okay. And I'm kind of nerdy like that, so I'm happy to do it. But I also start with a story that comes from a book called The Unforgiving Minute. Great book. This guy went to West Point, went to Ranger School, and he's talking about how he's at Ranger School. And the instructor, they're on a forced march, and the instructor stops them somewhere along the way. They're very tired, and he starts asking, "Why are you here?" And somebody says, "Well, my platoon sergeant made me." Or, "Why are you here?" "For the challenge, sir." "Why are you here?" And he gets through all of them, and he says, "That's the wrong answer. You're here for the people you lead. You owe them your Ranger tab. This is for them, not for you." And so, idea number one, lesson number one is leadership's about others. And if you start with that and start moving from that point forward, everything starts to go right. If you don't start with that, everything else becomes about you building your little kingdom. I'm about to have in a couple of weeks Scott Roden on my podcast. That name probably isn't a household name. He was the president of a seminary, and he wrote a book called The Steward Leader. And that's a big theme with him as well, is that, it's not about you building your kingdom. You're a steward on God's behalf to be entrusted with that which he's entrusted you with, and you steward that properly. Otherwise, if you stop doing that, you build your own little kingdom. And if you start building your own kingdom, everything goes wrong. Now, if it's all about you instead of all about them, or actually God, and taking care of them on God's behalf as a steward. But if it's all about you, you start to enslave yourself, because now every time somebody resists you, they're resisting an idea, they're resisting you. If they're in opposition to what's going on here, loyal opposition, no, this is a personal affront. Even if you're successful, you lose. Right? Because now you're all tied up, like your success, you're like a slave to that, as opposed to the concept of, like, if God puts something in your hand, it's in there, it's in your hand, and you hold it loosely. You just, like, if it's there, I'm going to steward it, but it's not like, oh no, I got to protect this with all my, right? Everything goes wrong if you don't have that mentality. So in that course, we're dealing with those kinds of mentalities. I'm going to have James Hunter on my podcast as well next week. And he wrote a book called The Steward. And he also had the Servant Leadership Training Course, which is an audio presentation that he did some years back that I use in class as well. And it's the same kind of thing. Like he talks about, again, I'm trying to get the mindset correct, right? He talks about, like, leadership is love. Like, what did I just say about care? Leadership is love. I tried to find a better word, he said, but I kept coming back to it's love. It turns out that if you simply love your people, a lot of things fall into the right place. And he had a lot of other great nuggets, but he went through 1 Corinthians 13, the love
Sure.
chapter. Love is patient, love is kind, love is right. So, and he said, look, go through this, think about your people, and put your name in there. When I'm thinking about them, Darin is patient, Darin is kind, Darin, and go through his long suffering, right? Not easily angered. Wow, that's a convicting kind of thing.
It is.
Am I really doing that with my people? If I am really doing that with my people, they react very differently than if I'm using them for my own purposes.
So I've never had, and I'm writing this down before I forget, I've never had anyone talk about using 1 Corinthians 13 as a guide for leadership.
Yeah.
It makes total sense.
It does make sense. And again, because you're thinking in terms, sometimes we think in terms of leadership, like, I've just got to have it all together so that people will follow me. Don't worry about that. Worry about taking care of our shared objectives. Like, what is it? And by the way, Kouzes and Posner is another book that I use in that class, the leadership challenge. And your vision's a terrible word. I've been mulling about this recently. I think we should throw vision out. I'm not sure what the right word is, but it has to be something more like our shared understanding of how things work. Like, you and I aren't we're on the same page about the grammar that we use to have this conversation, right? Well, we're on the same page about, some broad things in life, like don't go kill people and other, whatever those shared assumptions. That's what vision needs to be, because it has to be shared between you and I, not vision, because otherwise you start thinking, I have my vision. And then we're thinking, oh no, I don't want to do that. Right. So if you have a shared vision, if it's really what everybody actually wants to do anyway, and you just help them get there, that's a far more powerful thing than here's my vision, right? Like Carly Fiorina coming into HP as a white knight on the horse. No, that's silly.
But so you bring up vision. When you're in an organization, it is either the chief executive officer's vision or the executive team's vision, and it's their job to put together a team around them that buys into and supports that vision, right or wrong?
Incomplete. Yeah. So, I mean, if they stop at the executive team, it's not going to filter down and it won't get done. Right. I spend time beating up on this in my principles, not principles of management, my managing with excellence and integrity, a different class at CSU. So what happens is the smart people all go in a back room somewhere and they say, this is our vision. And they come out and say, here's the new vision. And we're like, that's not going to work. Well, these people are lazy. Well, no, they just know that it's not going to work. But if the leader had actually thought enough about the person, they're not just a function, they're a human being that has to put up with whatever they're going to come up with. And they invite them into the process from the start to say, hey, look, here's where we think we ought to be going. How do you see this? Where should we be going? To the degree that they do that, they'll get actual answers, because it turns out people answer questions when they're asked. But when they're not asked, they don't know, and the leaders don't know, and they're doing the best they can, but they can't know everything, right? They're not God. So they inevitably are going to screw up somewhere along the way. But if you didn't ask people, you don't get the answers to the question. So we do leadership all wrong so much, like the way that you have framed it. The leader has his executive team. Well, what about everybody else all the way through the organization? Now, obviously, everybody can't have equal access to all that conversation, but to invite them into the process, those that are interested. Let me ask you this. Do you want to do your work the way that you want to do it, or do you want to do it the way somebody else who doesn't know how to do it tells you how to do it because he's a new VP? Right? Yeah. I mean, it's silly. You know better, right? Right from the start.
Well, and that's why when a new leader of any people group is brought into an organization, the first thing, at least I believe, that they should be doing is, yes, they were hired for their skills. They were hired for what they have accomplished previously. They were hired for what they said they're going to accomplish. But if they don't spend a period of time, whether that is, depending on the organization, 30 days, 90 days, just walking around, listening, hearing things, grasping, getting the wisdom and understanding of how the organization works, they're going to fail.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so I think if you don't look lazy your first 30 days, you're doing something wrong. And what I mean by that is you should be just like hanging out, spending time, getting to know people, what they do, how what the lay of the land is, those kind of things. And the people that are miserable failures are those that are going in, I have a plan, here's where we're going to go this way. And they don't stop to listen and find out what really is going on first. Your plan is theoretical. The people are the real deal, and you got to get to know the people first. I got to give props to my college president. I teach at Charleston Southern University. Our president, Dr. Costin, is a retired 2-star general, chief of chaplains in the Air Force. It turns out they don't just give out those stars. And he's proved that. He came into a university setting. Now he's got like 4 or 5 degrees, so it's not like he wasn't qualified academically, but he came into a university setting saying, look, I came from a different culture, so I'm going to be a organizational anthropologist, and I'm just going to try to understand what it is that you do and how we can help you do what you do better. Brilliant. I mean, there's not a better way that you could start than to do that, to admit I don't know everything. Sometimes people are like, oh, I have to show them that I have all the answers or they won't follow me. No, we know you don't have all the answers. Like, you think we're stupid too? I mean, we know that. So, but what he did was absolutely the right thing to do. And when you first enter an organization, that's your sweet spot where you can do that. You have this honeymoon period where we know you don't know it. So ask all the questions that you want. So start asking instead of just going in trying to pretend that you know everything, because you don't. And we know you don't.
That is great. I love that. And I've seen more and more people doing that. So we've gone 33 minutes on a 30-minute show. It's been rapid paced. Very good. So first of all, thank you so much for your willingness to appear. I do have a final question for you. Sure. But if anyone wants to get in touch with Darin, here's his email address. Mm-hmm. He also hosts a leadership group on Facebook that I should have put the name here, but I didn't. What is it called?
Yeah, so it's Facebook /groups /learn leadership, LEARN leadership, as one word, just put together. And come to the podcast, whatever. I'm just trying to help people grow. And again, like I said, I see it as an extension of my classroom.
So final question, how do people take the academic wisdom, understanding, and knowledge that they are gleaning, seeking out, and searching on leadership from books, from watching programs like this, from interacting in your Facebook group and the whatnot, and actually apply it to their life in a meaningful way?
Yeah, by applying it. As soon as you started talking, I was like, apply it, just do it. You actually have to put it into practice. You can learn by reading. You can learn by listening to a podcast like this. That's true. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. But it doesn't mean much until you actually do it, until you step into doing it. You can't ride a bike. You can't learn to ride a bike by reading about it. I mean, you can learn about it. Same with swimming, same with judo, right? All those things and leadership is an applied art. You have to go do it. So, and take simple risks, do it on a small scale and then build from there.
Fantastic. So again, thank you so much for being on the show today. Everyone, that's Litvak Leadership Live for this week. We'll be back next week talking about leadership with someone else from definitely another perspective. You have a blessed weekend.